Right, so podcast 5, the Marauding Bass section pier fishing. So piers are a good places to start. You do associate them with being sort of more the beginner sort of sea angler places, having to go off the pier and this is that and the other. It can be a little bit busy in summertime. Bass time of year, early bass season, you can probably get on them first thing in the morning when there's not too many people about. The reason why they're quite good is because you can get quite a way out offshore at the end of the pier, but primarily the stanchions or the piles, so to speak, they are a sort of a safe haven for a lot of food. And bass can sort of get behind the piles in protection from the currents, a bit like a groin really on a beach. You get shelter, fish can shelter behind them, and there's a lot of food hangs around there, a lot of barnacles, a lot of small crabs and shrimps, and you know there's a whole sort of food chain thing going on down there. So it's a good place to start now. Piers in my area, some of the bass can be quite big at certain times of the year, and they use like, some of them sort of use, I know it's a bit crude, but they use like 50-pound braid, and they sort of generally live bait with whole mackerel, whether it's just a treble hook in the top and just lower it down on the braid, on a trace system if you want, or if it's straight to the braid, I don't think it really makes a lot of difference. Just lowering it down and just waiting for it to, because the bass will take the mackerel head first and hook itself on a treble. In the nose there, you can do sand eels, you can do it like that. Probably going to need some sort of a spin rod or something. You will need a drop net. A large sort of circular drop net with sort of a weight inside, big-ish, and have sort of triangle ropes coming off it to a line, weighted in the bottom, and you want to just leave it down, suspended just above the surface and tie it off, and just leave it there, out the way a little bit, so if you do get a good one on, you're never going to be able to hand line it up. Your trace and your main line wants to be enough to deal with like the piles and the barnacles, because if it's a good fish, it might go under. We expect to lose a few fish as well. So if you get one on, you can get it away from the pylons, and if there's another mate who you're with can just deal with the net, you can just sort of guide the fish into the net and then hoik it up with the rope. So with regards to sort of conditions and tides and things like that, so the same principles apply to some of the other podcasts. You could probably fish the pier in slightly rougher conditions as well, if you're just literally lowering it down, if you've got sort of a bucket, some live baits and things like that, or if you want to fish peeler crab on the bottom down there, or worm baits. So a good surf runner, you could probably fish them quite sort of when you couldn't probably sort of fish off the beach too much. So when it's really sort of rough, you'd be surprised, you'd be able to still pick off a bass or two. So let's just say it's calm, so you can float fish with like a ragworm, some lugworm, a sand eel, artificial lures, just like big trout, sea trout fly, drifting on the surface, so to speak. You should be able to see a few fish as well if it's clear. So look for the dark areas, under the pier, and expect a few tackle losses, so bring a spare reel, some line and stuff like that, even a spare rod and things like that. You really want to go sort of, for me doing that, you want to go sort of late evening, early morning sort of time to avoid the crowds. You can go with a mate and sort of take over a corner, so to speak, and might be able to bring another rod and just mess around with a few other bits and pieces. You can sort of put on a metal spoon or metal ticer or something like that, a metal, and just ping it out and just let it touch bottom, wind it, drop it down, you know, and just work along, casting that way. So you can pick off one or two fish. Try a Savage Gear sand eel, 30 grams, something like that. Lob out, let it on braid, let it dink bottom, wind it up a few turns, let it just drop down, dink again, wind it up. Bit like perk fishing if you're on a boat or something like that, just along with the piles are there. Right at the end, I'm talking right at the end of the pier. Depends how big the pier is, maybe midway, I don't know. You'll find your spots where there's a few fish. So you need a drop net, the same principles apply, strong enough tackle to deal with the fish. I mean, if the tide's starting pulling your gear right under the pier, I suggest going the other side maybe if it becomes a little bit too difficult for you. So yeah, so that's pretty much the pier fishing. Some nowadays want some money off you to fish on the end, so you might find you get your own little secluded bit away from a lot of the people. Some record bass have come from the piers. Sandown Pier in the Isle of Wight has got some nice piers on the Isle of Wight, very good for bass. Sandown Pier had, I think off the top of my head, the record for a while, 19 something or other. Yeah, a lot of break walls sort of seem to sort of produce fish, whether it's because a lot of people fish it, you know. But it is a sort of a hot spot for bass where they hang out, that's for sure. It's a bit like a wreck. You know, they like the shelter from the, they're like an ambush point, whether it's a marl crop, whether it's a pinnacle, whether it's a pier, load of piles, whether it's a wreck. Bass like ambush points from the tide, where they just sit and wait for the shoals of baitfish to come over the top and then they intercept. That's pretty much it really. I mean, there's not much more else I can say really about pier fishing. I mean, if you've got any questions, just drop us a line. Something I've done a hell of a lot of. I'm more of a surf caster for bass on sandy beaches, big surf sandy beaches. Fish for them in Ireland on some lovely sort of surf beaches. Around the Norfolk coast as well. And you do always hear in the local paper some big bass being caught off the piers around here by holidaymakers. But unfortunately the crowd sort of put me off a little bit. I like it a little bit more secluded doing my sort of fishing. A lot less interference during the day and stuff like that, finding my spots that way. But again, the pier is quite shallow. It's a good place to target them. That really is. It's definitely worth a few goes if you're sort of stuck for where to go. Lures all bait, really is. But like I say, you need a drop net. You might be able to buy one. I think I saw one on Angling Direct a few years ago. They wanted quite a lot of money for it, but it was well made and it was like saved you a lot of aggravation. If you're a bit of a DIY enthusiast, you can make your own. So yeah, that would be my advice. Fixed pull multiplier. You know, it's probably best just to use a sort of a 9-foot spinning rod really with a sort of a 3000 fixed pull, fairly sort of strong braid, 30-40 pound braid I would say, something like that. You might want to use, if you're getting a lot of tackle losses, you might not want to use expensive braid. You might just want to go to mono. If you're just dropping it down live baiting, go with some stiff 40 pound mono or something with a slightly bigger reel with like a jumbo multiplier or something, 8000 or something. Do something a bit crude, but if you're just hooking up with them and just dragging them to your drop net, do you know what I'm saying? But you can run into some big bass fishing that way, fishing off the end of a pier. That's an area where you've got probably a better chance of picking up a real big and doing it that way. Bit crude, not my style, but you might run into a better fish under those pylons. So if you're enthusiastic enough and you can get some live baits, like you say, if you're stuck keeping live baits alive, you've got to buy one of those little miniature paddle and pull things, fill them up with seawater on the end there, and just chuck out your sabikis, hoik them up and just drop them in your paddle and pull, so you got them. And they'd probably take like a mackerel head, a fresh mackerel head, if you couldn't keep them alive for whatever reason. You could probably just lob that over. If they're there, they will find it. I'm sure they would. And they'll crash into it. So that's it. That's the pier fishing for bass. Any questions? Give us a call. Drop us a line, and I'll try and help out. All right. See you later.